Jang Ji-hoon suddenly wakes up frightened and asks Jung Oh-lee if she kissed him. She is surprised and tries to deny it to the director, but he interrupts her again, saying he doesn't want to make it a big issue, but questions how she is going to take responsibility for what happened. Jung tries to explain, saying it wasn't a kiss, but the director insists that it was at least a peck. He says he can't believe it, as he has experienced many things, but none of them have been a kiss while he was sleeping. Jung continues to deny it and finally manages to say with a sad expression that it was a tear, that the feeling of a kiss was because a tear fell on his face. Ji-hoon replies that she is good at lying, but she insists she is telling the truth. However, Ji-hoon doesn't believe her, as he finds no reason for her to shed a tear while looking at him. Jung, with seriousness, says it was because he resembled her late father. The director keeps insisting that it's a lie, but Jung firmly states that it's true. Ji-hoon starts pressuring her, asking in what ways they were similar and if she has a photo to show him. Jung, nervous, her story, saying it was because the director was as handsome as her father. She tries to leave, but the director stops her, reminding her that she had something to tell him the day before. She responds that she wanted to tell him he resembled her father and opens the door to leave. He reproaches her for making him wait an hour, but she asks if it was only an hour, dismissing it and leaving him with a devastated expression. Jung leaves the office, nervous, wondering what 1 hour means when she had waited 7 years. While complaining about life, Chae Eun-bi calls her from her desk. When she arrives, Jung, thoughtful, wonders about the reason behind the woman's piercing gaze, whether she now likes her, and then asks if something happened. Eun-bi asks where she was the day before, and Jung responds that she left early because of an emergency. Eun-bi retorts, saying it's not like she's the only one with emergencies. Jung, nervous, realizes that Eun-bi just wants to argue. Eun-bi reminds her that they divided the meeting tasks and that the day before, she and the other team members worked hard on the part assigned to Jung-oh. But Jung responds that she had already finished her part and uploaded it to the shared folder before anyone else. She asks her superior if she hadn't seen it. Eun-bi, confused and somewhat nervous, begins searching for the information, and Jung asserts that everyone else already verified the work. Additionally, she asks her to double-check and walks away from Eun-bi's desk. She leaves with a triumphant expression, mentally pleading that Eun-bi won't bother or threaten her at work anymore, as she won't let bullies go unpunished. She resolves not to let anyone threaten her again, as she needs to protect herself and Yena, referencing a promise she made. However, she laments that work life is very hard, revealing how exhausted she feels, reflecting that even without confrontations, it's extremely draining. When she opens the elevator, she runs into the director again and wonders why him, asking if he isn't going to get in. She agrees, though with some discomfort. That's when she sees Park Suk-yu stopping by the elevator and asks if he's also going to get in. But the man looks at who's inside and refuses, leaving Jung confused as she asks if the director had an argument with him, glancing sideways. She adds that Park is an angelic person and doesn't believe he could have made any mistakes. Quickly, she apologizes, wondering if she was too blunt, and comments that she only cares because he reminds her of her father. Ji-hoon asks if all daughters are like that, if they all care so much about their fathers. Jung confirms that they are. Then she suggests he reconcile, as it seems Suk-kyu cares a lot about him, leaving the atmosphere in silence. Meanwhile, Dobin, impressed, shows Yena a shiny jelly, commenting that it looks like her eyes. Jinseo observes both of them joyfully, thinking about how adorable they are. Then, she hears a noise at the door and announces she's on her way. When she opens it, she sees it's Ji-hoon, who then greets her. Jinseo is so surprised that she almost doesn't react in the moment, but then, embarrassed, repeats how surprised she is. They both greet each other, commenting on how long it has been since they last met. She invites him in and he enters, asking for permission. As she shows him around the house, Ji-hoon reveals he bought some fruits. Jin-seo thanks him but says it wasn't necessary. Then, she asks him what brought him to her house, and he replies that he came to look for Seo-kyu, who had left work early. Jin-seo says he hasn't arrived and that she'll try to contact him. Then she invites him to sit down. Dobin asks who he is, and his mother replies that he's a friend of his father, Uncle Ji-hoon. Dobin greets him, and the director responds courteously. Then the boy takes the opportunity to mention that his friend is also present and points to Yena. They exchange deep looks, as if they already know each other. Jin-seo tells Dobin that, when the time comes, he should say his friend is also there. Dobin says it, but his mother adds the same with a kind expression, and the director understands. She reflects that it would be Dobin's girlfriend, someone he fell in love with at first sight, and thinks that all kids are adorable. Soo-kyu, while walking down the street, remembers his wife mentioning Yena's visit and that he should arrive home late so as not to disturb the children. Park, feeling sad, reflects that Ji-hoon always drank with him, even if they weren't friendly. His phone rings, and Park answers. Jin-seo, upset, yells at him to return immediately. He asks if Yena had already left, but his wife responds no, although it's an emergency because Ji-hoon is at their house. This leaves Park in shock. Dobin brings something to drink to the guest and asks his uncle if he knows how to play Go. The uncle replies that he knows a little. The boy invites him to play and asks if he knows how to lose. The director returns the question, asking if Dobin truly knows how to play, and Dobin mentions that he attends a Gyo Academy. Then the boy sees Yena and asks her to watch him play Go with his uncle, and she decides to observe. The boy tells his uncle to start, but Yena corrects him, saying that's not right and that the person with the black pieces should start. Dobin responds that he already knew that, so they start playing, and with each of the boys' moves, Yena intervenes, saying it should be done differently, and Dobin simply accepts it. The director thinks the girl is very good at playing Go, and then asks what happens if he places the piece there. The girl seems a bit thoughtful and decides to move another piece. The man looks at her and wonders if she's the same age as Dobin, which would be 6 years old. He curiously adds how she could be so intelligent. Jin-seo arrives with food and comments that Yena is truly talented, beautiful, and intelligent. The director asks if her name is really Yena, and the girl confirms it is. Then he asks who taught her to play Go, and Yena replies that it was her teacher. He insists, asking why not her father, and the girl responds that she doesn't have a father. The director seems to get nervous and thinks he shouldn't have asked that. Upon hearing that, Dobin asks if he should offer her his father, but Yena replies that it's fine. Just then, Park Seo-kyu arrives and is embraced by his children. He then asks what the director was doing there, and the director replies that he came to see him. So he gets up and suggests that he'll stop there, asking her to play with Dobin instead. It's then that the girl asks the director when he'll return, and he asks why she wants to know. Yena joyfully answers that it was fun. They both begin discussing which day he might come back to play Go again, and the little girl suggests a Monday, pulling on his clothes and encouraging him to play with her again. A bit nervous, the man confirms they can play Go again, and they agree it will be a Monday in 3 weeks. Ji-hoon says goodbye and leaves, thinking that children forget quickly, so everything will be fine. Park and Ji-hoon walk as Park mentions that he can't take too long. Ji-hoon understands his position. After distancing themselves a bit, Jung-ho runs toward Jin-seo's house. Young arrives, knocks on the door, and Jin-seo answers, inviting her in. Yena and her mother see each other and both smile, calling her daughter Princess Yena. Young comments that it must have been difficult for Jin-seo to take care of Yena, but she replies that it wasn't and adds that thanks to the girl, Dobin has matured a lot. She even offers to take care of Yena whenever needed, suggesting leaving her every day. Jin-seo asks her son if he'd like that, and he agrees, saying they should live together, but his mother scolds him for being rude in saying that. This makes both mothers laugh. After that lovely moment, Young and her daughter walk down the street, talking about the day. The mother asks if she really had so much fun, and the girl replies yes, but says the reason is a secret. The mother, confused, is surprised that her daughter is keeping a secret. Yena mentions that in a few weeks she'll need to return to Dobin's house and asks with a kind expression if she'll be allowed to go again. At the bar, Jung Ji-hoon and Park Soo-kyu are talking. Ji-hoon apologizes for being rude to Park, but Park, with a slightly annoyed tone, asks if Ji-hoon really thought he was on his mother's side. Ji-hoon responds that he didn't, but fails to convince him, and Park insists that it is the truth. Park says it's fine, but admits he felt very upset by Ji-hoon's attitude. Then he asks if Ji-hoon thinks he can reason properly when he lets himself be carried away by his emotions. Without waiting for an answer, Park states no and adds that even with few emotions, he can end up hurting people. Park reflects and remembers that 7 years ago, Ji-hoon was a man full of enthusiasm, with a special sparkle in his eyes, before the accident that made him lose his memory. He used to smile a lot and was more affectionate than he is now. But after that incident, Park felt he had lost his friend. Continuing with his thoughts, Park tells himself that although Ji-hoon seems kind and polite on the outside, inside, he is surely suffering. It's as if, in this summer, Ji-hoon is the only one still trapped in winter. Park only wishes he could pull him out of that cycle, but unable to do so, he settles for staying by his side as he always has. Instinctively, Soo-kyu comments that the director is part of his life and that he wants him to always be happy. He adds that, even if he isn't part of his whole life, he is definitely a significant portion of it. He wishes for the winter in which he lives to end and finishes by thanking his friend for looking for him. He also apologizes for the words he said earlier, though he still doesn't understand why Ji-hoon went to his house. In a flashback, Ji-hoon recalls Jung encouraging him to make an effort to find his friend because Park was very important to him. Ji-hoon tells this to Park, saying that, according to Jung, Park is valuable to him. Park sighs, still somewhat distrustful. Jung Ji-hoon arrives at the company and sees Jung Oh Lee talking to an employee. The employee comments that she is excellent at taking notes. Jung responds that she just wrote what she thought. But the employee keeps praising her, claiming that she is an excellent assistant manager no matter what she does. Almost instinctively, Ji-hoon interrupts the conversation, startling the employee, who greets him quickly. Ji-hoon asks what time the meeting will start, and Ki-hoon responds that it will be in 10 minutes. The director asks him to print the minutes of the previous week's meeting, and the employee nods. The director sits with Jung-oh and comments that, thanks to her, he and Park reconciled. Jung, somewhat confused, looks at him doubtfully, but Ji-hoon thanks her for her advice. This triggers a flashback in Jung, who remembers the dialogue where she gave her advice. You can't cut a beautiful ribbon with scissors just because it has a knot. The knot must be untied. Jung feels embarrassed and reflects that, in reality, she was saying those words to herself. She begins to feel guilty for not having looked for Ji-hoon in the past, for losing faith and not trusting her husband. She blames herself for not living a different life now. Ji-hoon jokingly tells Jung that if she misses her father, she can visit him. Jung, confused, asks what he means, and he reminds her that she supposedly looks like her father, insisting that she visit him to see for herself. She questions this, and then feels uncomfortable, but Ji-hoon persists in his suggestion. Finally, she thanks him, visibly embarrassed. At that moment, Ki-hoon arrives to inform the director that he has already printed the minutes of the previous meeting. The director, impressed, comments on how fast he was, and Ki-hoon confirms it. At the meeting, a female employee suggests that everyone share their ideas during the meeting, and Chae Eunbi volunteers to start. While Chae presents her ideas, The director seems somewhat nervous, and Jung notices that he is anxious and distracted. She wonders what is wrong with him. Chae continues talking about her project, but the director, still inattentive, drops the pen he was holding, which by chance ends up at Jung's feet. She wonders if he dropped it on purpose and is trying to make her pick it up. So she sighs and bends down to retrieve it, but before reaching the pen, the director bends down at the same time, and their hands touch almost romantically. Jung feels extremely embarrassed and quickly returns to her seat. She begins to wonder what the hell just happened, wanting to make sure it wasn't intentional. Chae continues explaining her project, and Jung reflects that the supposed flirtation by the director doesn't make sense if the person he loves is right in front of them. While everyone presents their ideas, the woman decides to interrupt to present her own project idea. A scene shows a person drinking beer, and the shot zooms out to reveal that the scene was from a movie another person was watching while drinking the same beer. Everyone at the table approves, highlighting that her proposal conveys the tranquility of drinking beer when watching an advertisement. Eunbi seems annoyed, but Jung is praised and smiles with satisfaction. Chae Eunbi, in the restroom, begins to question why Jung Ji-hoon is acting strange. She mentions that since the day she ran into Jung and Ji-hoon, everything has felt off, and even during today's meeting, things seemed unusual. She recalls a note she saw on Jung's desk and reassures herself that Ji-hoon is not that type of person. She reflects that he has always kept his distance from women, to the point where some people questioned his sexuality. Finally, she feels uneasy thinking that the person involved in all this could be Jung-oh. Eunbi's thoughts are interrupted by a coworker who asks if she's okay. Eunbi replies that she's not, but her colleague insists on helping her. Eventually, Eunbi agrees and says she'll tell her, but it's a secret. Her co-worker promises to keep it confidential, and Eunbi begins talking about Jung-oh. She explains that Jung was a high school friend she tried to get close to, but when she succeeded, she discovered that Jung was the type of person who takes things without permission and uses them for herself, someone who copies others just to seem interesting. The co-worker is surprised by what she hears and comments that she didn't know Jung was like that. She asks if Jung has changed those habits, but Eunbi responds that she hasn't, and adds that Jung pretends to be shy, even though she frequently visits Ji-hoon. The co-worker asks why she does that, and Eunbi says she doesn't know but assumes it's to tell certain things to the director. Outraged by Jung's supposed actions, the co-worker says Jung needs to learn her place and promises to keep an eye on her for Eunbi's sake. At that moment, someone leaves the restroom, and both fall silent. Eunbi's friend mentions that it's the team leader, Seong Miran, and that she divorced her husband because he cheated on her with a coworker. She also adds that Assistant Lee will end up being hated by the leader because she overheard their conversation. At home, Jung braids her daughter's hair while reflecting on how tense the atmosphere at work has been for the past few days. She notes that besides the cold environment in Team 1, she now also feels it from the team leader. Then, she wonders if she did something wrong to make her team leader so nervous. At that moment, her daughter Yena snaps her out of her thoughts by mentioning that there's only 1 week left. Confused, she asks what she's talking about, and Yena reminds her that the day will be next Thursday. Jung thinks about how she could have forgotten such a special date and is surprised to realize that her daughter is about to turn 6 years old. She recalls that Yena was born prematurely and had to be hospitalized due to a condition called cyanosis. She also remembers something strange. Yena was born with a birthmark called a salmon patch, which was supposed to disappear after a year. But the mark, which was supposed to fade, still remains. She explains that in other places, this mark is known as the angel's kiss, symbolizing that the baby is so beautiful that an angel kissed their forehead. Jung then asks her daughter what she wants for her birthday, and Yena replies that she wants a birthday party. Hearing this, her mother hugs her tenderly and reflects on how Yina turned her world into paradise. Internally, she calls Jung Ji-hyun and tells him that her daughter is about to turn 6 years old. Back at the office, Jung is confronted by Eunbi's co-worker, who asks if she heard about the sudden liquor meeting at Daewon. The assistant responds that she hasn't heard anything about it, and Eunbi's co-worker tells her to try to pay more attention. With a cold expression, Cho continues, saying that the advertiser is on the way and wants a dinner with the production team. However, since the person in charge is traveling, the only one who can take on this responsibility at that moment is the assistant manager, Young-oh Lee. Nervously, she accepts the task, though she thinks that in the past she would have avoided this situation at all costs. However, now she feels it's okay to take it on and leaves to eat something nice to calm herself. Meanwhile, director Jung Ji-hoon goes to talk to Eunbi's friend, who looks visibly anxious and scared. Ji-hoon asks if there's no one in production team 2. After she provides more information about where the others are, Ji-hoon realizes that only one member of the production team was sent alone to speak with the advertisers. The woman tries to answer, saying the others are busy with other tasks, but Ji-hoon interrupts her, calling the team leader to request the contact information for assistant manager Jung-oh Lee. On a rainy day in another place, Young notices that the umbrellas are sold out and that the rain started suddenly. She debates whether to borrow one or wait for the rain to let up, as it seemed light. From afar, Ji-hoon sees her and thinks she couldn't have gone far without an umbrella. He is with Park Soo-kyu, who suggests sharing the umbrella, but Ji-hoon tells him to use it alone and says he can run in the rain. His friend questions why and says they could use it together, but the director insists on using only one. However, he asks him to leave after 3 minutes. Ji-hoon starts removing his coat, approaching Jung and surprising her by asking if she has an umbrella, leaving her nervous. Jung responds that she doesn't have one, so Ji-hoon suggests they share his. He opens his coat over their heads to shield them from the rain, but Jung, nervous, refuses, saying it's okay. She wonders if he wants them to run together in the rain, then argues that she can buy one nearby. However, Ji-hoon insists and proposes to accompany her at least halfway. With few options, Jung agrees, but throughout the journey she is tense and thinks this is all crazy. From a distance, Park Soo-kyu watches the scene and comments that Ji-hoon seems to be in a romantic movie. At the same time, he feels happy, knowing he now has something to tease his friend about. Ji-hoon and Jung-oh were walking in the rain, and the woman stopped to say that they just needed to walk a little further, as they might find an umbrella in the shop across the street. That's when they both went in. Jung thanked him and mentioned she was going to buy him an umbrella as a token of gratitude, to which Ji-hoon said it wasn't necessary. However, Jung approached the vendor and asked if there was only one umbrella left. The man replied that he had several more in stock, so Jung bought 2, giving one to Ji-hoon and keeping the other for herself. Ji-hoon tried to refuse, saying he would return it since he had many at home. But Jung insisted, arguing that he could at least use it that day and then return it to her later, as she didn't have one at home. Meanwhile, she thought to herself that a simple umbrella is not good enough for someone rich like him. Then, Ji-hoon called her to resume their walk, and they continued talking under their umbrellas. Jung suggested they could go to the restaurant Ki-hoon had recommended since it was nearby. However, Ji-hoon proposed another place he preferred. Jung agreed, but joked that if anyone criticized her for choosing the wrong place, it would be the director's fault. Ji-hoon replied that she could do as she pleased. Back at the office, Chae-eun-bi asked Cho where assistant Jung-oh Lee was. The redhead replied that she had sent her to prepare for the meeting. Eun-bi mocked, commenting that they couldn't do much in that situation since everyone was busy. But mentally, she thanked Cho for helping her without even being asked. She felt euphoric imagining Jung-ho having to manage on her own until the others arrived. Eunbi saw the director's secretary and asked if she was finishing her shift and if the director had already left. The woman confirmed, adding that he was on his way to meet with the production team and advertisers. She then asked if Chae and Cho would also attend, leaving Eunbi with a shocked expression. Then both headed to the hard rock music and Cho asked the manager to walk more slowly, but Eunbi responded that it was all her fault, questioning how she could send that writer alone to deal with the clients. Eunbi reflected that things weren't going as she had planned. Then she entered and saw something that shocked her. It was Jihoon and Jung together smiling. After that, her face turned into a mix of surprise and rage. This caused her to have a flashback of lawyer Chae Eun-yup, who told her she wasn't even capable of winning Jihoon over for herself. That man reminded her that she had to marry him since the election year was approaching. He added that even though she wasn't good at anything, she should at least excel in marriage. Back in the present, Eunbi reaffirmed to herself that her only purpose in life was to marry him, revealing a determined look. After dinner, Jung-oh and Jung Ji-hoon stopped by a convenience store. Jung commented that everyone at the meeting had been drinking and asked Ji-hoon if he wasn't worried about going to work the next day. Both tried to pay for what they picked up at the same time, but Jung joked that she would choose something more expensive since the director was willing to cover the costs. Ji-hoon asked if she was okay. She confirmed and thanked him for the drink. Then she asked him what he thought about the dinner and whether they had managed to impress the advertisers. Suddenly, Jung began to show signs of discomfort. Alarmed, Ji-hoon asked her if she had really drunk that much. In a low voice, Jung replied that she wasn't feeling well. The director, somewhat concerned, offered to take her home, but she declined, saying she could go by herself. As she walked away, Ji-hoon watched her, reflecting on how Jung always found a way to leave. This made him feel bad about something he didn't understand, and he questioned who she was and how he could make her turn around and look at him. Impulsively, Ji-hoon called out to her as she walked away, asking where she thought she was going. Jung, surprised, looked at him and thought for a moment that Ji-hoon's memories had returned. She approached him, hoping to confirm it, almost as if she was going to kiss him. He seemed like he was going to embrace her, but then questioned what that reaction of hers was about. Then, noticing that he wasn't reacting as she expected, she told herself it had all been just a joke. The moment was broken when Ji-hoon, in a serious tone, commented that she seemed very drunk and suggested she pull herself together, even if he reminded her of her father. Devastated by his words, Jung asked him if he was joking. He confirmed that he was, but added that it didn't matter since she should go home in that state, revealing that she was angry. He then commented that he would take her home. But in a burst of sadness and desperation, Jung ran off without responding, leaving Ji-hoon behind. He, meanwhile, stood watching her leave, confused and full of conflicting thoughts. And with that, we've reached the end of this week's chapter. If you made it all the way to the end, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this chapter in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe so our community can keep growing and we can reach more fans like you. See you in the next video. In the meantime, if you're from the near future, I'll leave you the next chapter and a comic you're sure to enjoy. Thank you for being part of this adventure.